All right, Todd. Thank you for joining. I think, well, this is called the Founder Net Marketing Show, and I think you are a great, person to talk to because clearly you guys are doing this sort of stuff, and from the looks of it from the outside, it looks like you figured something out. I mean, your content pops up on my feed all the time, and it's great content, and so wanted to dive into stuff with that. Just before we go down the rabbit hole of like how you do it, why you do it, how it works, blah 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 blah. Can you just give a like quick intro, who you are, Champify, who your ICP is, what problem you solve for them, just so people have some context around you and the company.
Yeah, for sure. And Finn, thanks for having me. So my name's Todd Busler. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Champify. We're a seed stage company backed by Altman Capital. We have about 60 or so customers today. We mainly sell to high growth B2B companies between 250 employees to a couple thousand employees. Our sweet spot. Companies come to us when they're struggling with top of the funnel. Maybe their SDR motion isn't working, or they're not getting the same productivity from the AEs, or they're realizing inbound different page strategies have been really competitive, but they have a bunch of happy customers, right? So our best customers have tons of happy customers, tons of happy users, good G2 reviews, pretty viral products. And what we help them do is understand where all of their advocates are to make sure as people are moving around different jobs, we make sure the right person at that company knows about that change, and we can go A, protect churn, and B, help generate new pipeline. Before this, I was an operator in residence for a year at a venture firm called Unusual Ventures, and then really grew up in SaaS at a product analytics company called Heap, where I was the fifth employee from about 0 to 40 million or so. It was, five of us to about 300 employees.
Very nice. So ICP is go-to-market leader, sales and marketing of B2B companies,
Yeah,
mid-market.
yeah, exactly. I would say like mid-market, lower enterprise are usually demand gen, sales leader, CRO. You need to have kind of technical influencer, which is usually rev ops, sales ops,
Yep.
but usually led by sales or demand gen focused marketing.
Yep. And I'm sure you guys are early stage, so part of this is still being figured out, but can you give me an idea for ACV?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, our smallest customers pay us $15,000. Our biggest customers pay us way into the six figures.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very standard for us to be doing deals between 30 and 60K.
Yeah. And so classic sales led motion.
Yeah, classic sales led motion. There's no PLG. I would say our pipeline, and we'll talk about this today. A lot of it comes inbound, mostly via word of mouth, referrals, LinkedIn. And the second part is we have an outbound motion that works. I think a lot of this LinkedIn stuff helps make that work.
Yep.
Hard to measure, but that's the
Okay.
hypothesis. And then we use our own product as well, which frankly, we're not like an amazing fit for yet, just because we're a little too small for the sweet spot, but it still generates, double digits of our pipeline output.
Love it. So let's start maybe with the why. So, and I think this fits into your ICP, but tell me why you decided to allocate resources, time, budget, headspace into doing this whole LinkedIn content stuff.
Yeah, great question. So, all right, I think a lot of it is shaped by my experience. So, like I said, I was at a product analytics company called Heap. We were competing with like Amplitude and Mixpanel and Pendo, and that category got a lot of money and was very crowded. We never figured out marketing. We were about 70 to 80% sales driven the whole entire time I was there. SDRs and AEs, outbound prospecting, never had a marketing leader in seat more than 15 or 16 months. I think what we started to see was that gets harder and harder over time. And not having some of that brand awareness really starts to catch up with you because it keeps getting harder and harder to acquire those customers. So I felt some of that when we got to like 15, 18, 20 million in ARR. It just started to get a lot less efficient. Next thing I saw, Finn, is after Heap, I went to this, like I said, a venture firm called Unusual Ventures. It was all early stage. So their job was usually first check, getting people from like 0 to a million, 0 to 2 million in ARR. And what I realized is that awareness matters a ton. Like people were building the amazing products, crazy technical depth, but if you couldn't get in front of people, it didn't matter, right? And I think what I was helping a lot of those founders do was run some of these email cadences, run some of these cold calling scripts, run some of this LinkedIn messaging. And it was just, an order of magnitude harder than it was in my days at Heap, right? So looking at what this was in 2016 versus 2021, 2022, I said, look, if you're starting a company, you have to be thinking about awareness and getting attention. And it has to be a big part of our strategy. I think the last part is I had read David Gerhardt's founder brand right as I was getting ready to start this. And I was kind of like, look, I lived this problem. I know it. I am our buyer. If someone's going to talk about a lot of things our customers want to hear, I should be able to do that well.
Love it. And I'm just going to do one quick thing because I kind of just assume that people are aware of you and your content, but I'm just going to quickly share my screen here and tell people why I'm getting you on, because this is Todd. This is LinkedIn posting, I would say like 2 to 4 times a week, looking like. And if you look at his engagement, this post from 3 days ago, 530 likes, 150, 110, 78. He got some of his team members, 250, 230. 400, so 500. So I just wanted to drop that in here, and it's great content. It's in depth. So I read your Taylor's post, your head of growth post, that it took a while to get you to get rolling on LinkedIn. So okay, it makes sense. You need awareness. Your buyers are active on LinkedIn. You are your buyers. You have that experience that the go-to-market, marketing, and sales leaders need. So you have a lot of relevant things to talk about, but it still takes time to dedicate to it. So talk to me through the timeline maybe for you when you first got started, dropping off a little bit, and then eventually like committing more to it. So like how long you've been doing it and stuff.
Yeah. So the first thing is I wish I started doing this earlier. And I have a mentor of mine, a guy named Matt Cameron. He runs this really like frontline sales training academy called SaaS. It's awesome. I was talking to him when I was getting ready to start Champify, and he said, he's New Zealand. So he goes, mate, you have to do this. Like you have to be writing on LinkedIn. You have a lot to say. Regardless of what you do, building this audience is going to help. You might think people don't care, but actually you have a lot of good things to say. Start talking about it. And I kind of said, yeah, and brushed him off like, okay, whatever. I don't really want to be that person. So I wish I started earlier. I kind of started, but I never really took it seriously. Like I would basically like, okay, if I had a good idea, I'd post about it. I didn't think anything about the hooks or the distribution or what the takeaways should be. I didn't think about any of that. I just said, cool, I had something interesting that's somewhat aligned to what our buyers might care about. I'm going to talk about it. So I think when I'd started, it was something like 5,000. And in the first 18 months, it went to like 9,000 followers. So like decent growth, but not like incredible.
So when you say in the first 18 months, when was that starting point? Do you remember?
The starting point was like right when we were getting ready to launch, or even a little bit before we launched. So probably about April 2022, right? There was like 4,000 or 5,000 followers. And then us launching and doing some podcasts and stuff got a little bit more awareness. But it wasn't until like November, December of last year, just less than 6 months ago, we started to take this really serious. And I think the change was realizing, look, a lot of our inbound's coming from LinkedIn. We're not taking, like, we don't have enough structure. What would it mean if we did? And I think that's when Taylor really started to push me. And I think it took some of getting out of my own head to be like, much like you build a good product, distribution's everything. I think about the same thing on LinkedIn. You might have the best stuff to say, but you better be really thoughtful about what that hook is. You better be really thoughtful about what that takeaway is. You better be really pithy and concise in your writing, or it's just not going to it's not going to take off. And it's kind of, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not taking that seriously, because you're just not going to get the eyes, right? And that's really the goal here.
So I know people will always kind of say a lesser number than they actually do, because I feel like CEOs always want to say that I'm not spending that much time. I'm just curious, how much time do you spend on LinkedIn right now with everything? Engaging, writing content, replying to people, messages?
Yeah, I would say probably something like on average an hour a day.
Okay, that's still pretty good.
Yeah,
could easily be more.
I write on Sundays. I have a brainstorm on Mondays around topics. One day a week, which is usually Sunday, I write for a couple hours. And then during the week, it could be, 30, 45 minutes per day. I don't think I'm great at like engaging at the right people, or, a lot of people are like in circles of they're doing, hey, like my stuff, I'll like your stuff. I don't really do any of that. I just kind of write good stuff that I think is relevant and try to be consistent with it, and just try to be opinionated and have a point of view, and then just be really consistent.
Got it. So you have one ideation session a week on Mondays where you have a sparring partner to figure out like what are the things I could be talking about. Is that roughly right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And throughout the week, I also have an Evernote on my phone where I'm constantly writing stuff down. So like any call I have where I'm like, oh shit, that was pretty interesting. That could be something interesting to talk about. Or wow, I read this, or this came up in a sales call, or wow, this recruiting conversation. I'm always taking notes, kind of review that with Taylor, and someone helps me write a little bit. and saying, hey, there's something there, pull on that, or what do you mean by this? And then we leave that with usually between like 3 and 7 posts. And then I go lock myself in my office and I just write them. And then we come back and edit them. I think we're tailoring on Sundays. I think what's been really helpful, someone that helps me write, they don't actually do any writing or there's no ideas. All it is trying to take my idea and make it more of a compelling hook and takeaway. That's really where I get the help. I'm not an expert at that. There's people that have studied this inside and out. And I have no desire to be an expert in that.
Right. So if I understand it correctly, on Monday you decide on the topics. It's actually not quite deciding on the topic, not in the sense of like, oh, I should talk about like how to hire AEs, because damn, that makes it really difficult to sit down. But you figure out the hook, and maybe the hook is, I interviewed 20 AEs in the last 30 days, and here's 4 takeaways I have of patterns that I saw in those conversations. And now it's really just like, once you have that hook, it's just writing it down.
Then there's 100%. Then there's right that post. I would say it kind of starts more with an idea. And then it's like, all right, is there a hook or interesting takeaway? Okay, go write that post.
Yeah.
That's kind of the structure.
Yeah. I think and I think that's great. The way that I explain it to people misunderstand that they think the first sentence of their LinkedIn post is the first sentence of their post, when in reality, that's their headline. And so they get started writing something like, what would you, but instead your first sentence needs to be, what's that hook that made that headline that makes someone read, right? What's that headline for an article that you would write? By the way, do you play online poker? This is a weird tangent, but I was trying to figure out.
Years, no.
I was trying to figure out, since the start of this call, like, you remind me of someone, and it's Tom Dwan. Like, you kind of look like him, and so I don't know. He's a poker pro, so cool. So again, guys, if you have any questions as we do this, feel free to drop them in. What have you noticed anything in terms of like the hooks or topics that do better than others? Like, what are some of the patterns or common denominators between those things?
Yeah, in general, people, I think what really works is a real experience that happened. I just talked to this person and learned X, Y, Z. That tends to work really well. The other thing that tends to work really well is numbers, right? Like, hey, this is exactly what happened over 15 conversations over the last 3 months, or here's we closed the deal for 150K. That was 3x bigger. Like, anytime you're using numbers and real stories, that tends to work quite a bit. Obviously, I think anything that's really emotional, I'm not that emotional of a person. I don't think I do that super well. So I think the things that work really well for us is really around like numbers or concrete stories that have just happened. And then I think most of it is like, I've lived through and made every mistake that new sales managers are doing, or first time VP of sales. So I think like I just have a pretty good understanding for our persona, what they're feeling and thinking. So I think what I say just resonates to them because they're like, oh shit, that just happened to me. Right. So I think trying to be as in the day to day of what my followers are feeling is what clicks.
Yep. David Göcke asks, selfish question. As a new content creator on LinkedIn with 5,000 followers, what would you do differently if you could go back to April 2022 and start all over again?
I would just take it seriously from day one, thinking about the hooks, the takeaways. Like, go study 5 people that are somewhat in your niche or similar types of people that you want to emulate, and go look at what they're doing. Like, there's so much commonalities between what works, and just take that part of it seriously. Like, I kind of were like, oh, that's cheesy. I never want to be the person doing weird spaces between things and using emojis. You're doing yourself a disservice and you're not taking it serious. Like, I think get over that. I would have had to get over that mental hump and then take those parts really serious early and just be super consistent. Like, it's hard. Most Sundays, I don't feel like doing this, and the reality is like, okay, you have to make time and do it. And I don't know about you, David, but for me, it didn't feel like work. Like, for me, I'm like, oh, I could be talking to customers. I could be writing a PRD, but like, this is work. This is the work. 3 hours here is going to do better than any outbound campaign I can run. Right. And I think that took me a little while to getting over.
David, follow-up questions.
No, that's so good. First of all, Todd, you do look like Tom DeWan. Love the poker reference. And you also said my name in German, which is awesome. I think you're the first person in 2024 who has said Gurka, which is Goki in English. Yeah, it's just for you. It's just like natural, right? So yeah, just to get more specific for this audience and for anyone who's listening with respect to B2B SaaS, Yes, consistency. I hear you. Yes, making it passionate. So, talking about, personal experiences with clean hooks and clear calls to action. What would you say really were the one or two things that helped you land those big SaaS deals or prepared you to land those SaaS deals over those 18 months? Like if you go back and say, maybe in that first month, I would have had a clearer call to action for my ICP, who would be maybe a sales decision maker, that might have helped me land something closer or sooner.
So this is outside the LinkedIn content strategy. You just mean like what would have helped us accelerate some of the deals?
No, within LinkedIn content strategy.
I don't know. I don't look at a lot of the LinkedIn stuff as like anything middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel. I look at the LinkedIn stuff as like purely awareness. How can we get people to say, hey, I think Todd is smart or has some interesting things to say. Therefore, other people at Champify are probably smart. Okay, I'm going to answer them. Like I look at it purely as just how can I get people to know who we are and know what we're trying to do to just get into conversations. I don't think there's anything I can say on LinkedIn that's going to help us middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel. I think there's other type of content that's valuable for that. But I mainly just think about it as does having some type of awareness mean that people are sharing my posts within the walls or within the Slack of that account? Therefore, when someone on my team or myself is reaching out, the chance of them answering is higher. So I think it's way more top of funnel oriented.
Yeah, I like the reference to dark social because I do that all the time, right? Take a screenshot, send it to a buddy, send it to a friend, send it to someone I care about because it resonates with them. So quantifying the value of that top of funnel impression, right? More views on your profile, more brand awareness, definitely understand the value prop there. I'm trying to get to like a conversion metric. And part of what's driving that question is when I talk to an executive and they're like, you want me to post on LinkedIn? Like, you want me to comment? You want me to update my LinkedIn brand? Yes, I do. So how do you justify that 1 hour of time that it requires for them to write their own comments? Yeah, you can do AI bots or hire VAs, but that's never authentic because your audience comes back, has conversations about those things, and you're left in the dark. And you have to follow up anyways. So authentic commenting where you're doing that is key. And building community in the comments is so important. So if you were to talk to a GTM executive today or someone who's VP of sales, VP of marketing, VP of customer success, and you wanted to justify with a business outcome in mind, the investment that it would take for 18 months to get to the results that you've had today, which is doubling your followers and driving more inbound leads. Maybe that's a perspective that could be helpful for others who are trying to justify the time investment, especially for executives.
There's 2 points. So the first part, I think the authenticity is key. Like, I don't think I do a great job of like every single comment, and Taylor and other folks like, hey, you have to go do that better. So I think I could be doing that better. I also never try to do things of like, oh, let me do a carousel about AI because I know that'll go viral and put a weird like selfie of me. I just don't do that. I just think like, hey, here's the content. I'm going to put it out there. I don't really try to game the system too much. What I would say, David, to that executive is, I mean, we use Google Analytics. We use Heap on our marketing website. And you could just see we started taking this really serious in December. Our web traffic's up like 40 to 60%. And our inbound leads are up dramatically. Most of our inbound leads self-describe to say, heard about you on LinkedIn. So it's like the data is pretty clear, and I would just show them that.
Do you guys use self-reported attribution?
Yeah, we do. So for every inbound, we ask person how they heard of us. Most people put in LinkedIn or word of mouth.
Right. Interesting. So if you would think about inbound versus outbound, how much of, if you have to put a percentage on it, how much do you think the reason for you doing this is so that you generate inbound versus so that outbound gets easier and reply rates go up because people have seen you before?
It's both. I don't know a specific example. What I mainly care about though is the outbound because I can't control who's coming inbound. So like a lot of other companies, a lot of people that are coming inbound, don't get me wrong, there's some that are great. There's a bunch that we don't really care about, right? That aren't great fits. Okay, maybe there's a decent fit here and there. But really, I think about it as like, does it increase the chance of our top accounts wanting to engage with us? Right. And I don't have enough data to say like, oh, response rates over time, just because there's been so many variables. There's more reps. There's more different things we're saying. There's different use cases we're targeting, right? There's new accounts we're talking to that I don't have the best example to say, hey, we know for a fact for outbound, we're getting Y% more efficient. But I mostly care about it is like, I want them to hear about us to make outbound work. Ideally, it draws good inbound, but we can't control it. So.
Right. Do you guys leverage any, like if you have a great post and it does well and it resonates clearly, do you then feed that into the cold campaigns in a sense that, oh shit, this message seems to be resonating. SDRs, please use this in your email, in your subject line, etc.?
A little bit. We'll do two things. We'll if some of them go wild, Taylor will sponsor some of the posts that we do just to even get some more. And it's relatively cheap to do that. And then we'll use some of that messaging of like, okay, wow, that did really seem to resonate. Let's try that in a sales call, or actually let's use that messaging. I don't think we're great about it, like automatically taking some verbiage and putting it into an outbound campaign. But it definitely kind of morphs a bit into our messaging.
Right. Makes sense. By the way, here, David, also for you, Dave shared an article. I guess Ted Mertz has a lot of great thoughts about this on posting on LinkedIn. Interesting. And so was it first you and now it's also your head of growth, or are there more people at the company that you're now adding now that it's kind of validated? Is the plan to like roll it out to every leader at the company, or how are you thinking about it?
It's interesting. When we started this, we were kind of like, hey, there's 3 people we think we should build some brand around, and 2 people took it really serious. Most people did not. Mm-hmm. And I think what we've found is that we have an SDR that has a pretty big following, very quirky character, but seems to work really well with the audience. He's a person that we're actively like kind of just letting him go and say, hey, keep doing your thing. It's working. And then
is that Will?
Because that's Will. Yeah, correct. Yeah. So that thing's working. That was kind of unintentional. Like he just started kind of writing and it really started to click. And obviously it's good for us because SDR awareness is good. Yep. And then for Taylor, it was kind of active to say, look, more and more demand gens involved in our deals, and they're ending up being a buyer, kind of a lot more than we expected. You have a lot of interesting things to say that those prospects or target accounts are trying to solve as well. Talk about this. And it took some push to get her there. But now she's been doing a great job, and her awareness and following is growing quickly as well.
Cool. I'm going to get your take on a couple of things that I keep hearing because you're in that space. So one of the things you hear a couple of people saying is that the SDR model is broken. Cold calling is getting less efficient. Cold emailing is less efficient. That this whole motion is just broken. Do you, given also that Will is your SDR is doing this type of stuff, do you feel like or think that the typical job description of a future SDR will look differently in the sense that instead of requiring great cold emailing and cold calling skill, you essentially want a content creator who's great at putting out LinkedIn content and Twitter content and videos that can spearhead kind of that type of penetration into the market?
Yeah, I obviously think a lot about this based on what we do. I think there's 3. I think the SDR armies that a lot of companies have used over the last 15, 20 years are going to go reduce in size quite a bit. I think people really look at the CAC of what it costs to acquire $1 of revenue through SDR armies. And I think people are very quickly realizing, hey, we might not be able to do that, at least based on today's macro world, interest rates, et cetera. I think that SDRs are going to look like one of 3 different flavors moving forward. One, what you said, Finn, which looks like that content creator getting a big TikTok following or having a YouTube channel or whatever that is for their persona. I think that's part 1. I think part 2, they're going to be way more ops nerds. Right. These going to be people are amazing with tools like Clay, or amazing at looping together 3 different intent tools or whatever that may be. And I think the third one is a window, which Will is, which is he's just unbelievable on the phone. And like right now, almost all of his meetings come through cold calls because our buyers answer the phone. We don't book a lot on email. It's almost all on LinkedIn and cold call. And he's incredible at it. I think that window will close, but I think there's going to be a 3, 4, 5 year time before that happens. I think like the window is closing quite a bit on email in terms of just response rates and volume, et cetera. And I think that will happen on phones too, but I think there's a window right now where that's open depending on your buyer. Will books 20 meetings a month. Most of it comes over the phone with target accounts and big accounts, right? Like that's pretty good.
And these are cold, so they are not people who engage with this content.
Fully cold. He doesn't touch any inbound, only going after target outbound accounts.
Interesting. I had Chris Walker on the show, who's obviously, quite big in this space. And he shared the stat that they measured that in 2023, his content, meaning his LinkedIn and the podcast that he's doing drove 10 million in revenue, in net new revenue in 2023, which we did the calculation, which is that if the average SDR gets paid 100K a year and the average SDR has quota is 4 times that at 400K, that means that he drove more revenue than 25 times the average quota hitting SDR, which obviously not every SDR hits quota, which is kind of our thesis around founder-led marketing, right? That you as the founder, now that content is scalable and you can build an audience of 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 followers, you're not bound by the time and the day, but by the quality of your content. Do you think about yourself as like an SDR essentially for your company, that you're
100%. My job is to fill our AE's job, our calendars with people that want to talk to them. That's my job. Like, think about pipeline all day long. So that's 100% how I think about it. I still think we're going to need SDRs because some people are just not going to come inbound as aware as they are, right? I just think they're picking up things later in the awareness journey, right? So that's how I think about it. But yeah, I mean, Finn, you're 100% right. Like, someone tried to sell us a sponsorship the other day and I was like, cool. Like, what do I get for this? And they're like, wow, you're going to get 10,000 eyes from this amount of people. I'm like, our shittiest post gets 10 times more than that. Why would I ever pay you for that? Right. So like, you just start to see how valuable it could be. And obviously Chris Walker's 100 times, times bigger, but like, it's super valuable. So I think that's when David asked that question, what would I do differently? I would take it seriously up front. Right. And realize like, hey, you have to play this seriously with the same level of strategy of anything else, if this is the bet you want to make. And again, for us, it makes a lot of sense because our buyers are there. If your buyers aren't there, maybe it's a different channel, right?
I'm curious, do you think this type of activity, what you're doing, is there a certain stage of the company where there's a sweet spot, early stage, growth stage, late stage, public company? Does it not matter?
I don't think it matters. I really don't think it matters. I just think at the beginning, it's really hard because there's so many companies going after what feels like the same exact problem a lot of different times. So how do you get awareness? Right? Like, I think it can have the biggest impact early stage company, but there's a lot of big companies where people are starting to do this really well, right? Like really, really well, like companies that seem pretty sleepy that are spinning up amazing podcasts and brands. And, I think it matters across the board, probably the impact a little bit bigger earlier stage. Cause I just don't know how else you get customers, right? Like, you have to have some awareness. It's really challenging.
Right. And I mean, I don't think he does it intentionally like that, but I mean, Elon Musk, you could say that he's kind of doing that with the content he puts out. I mean, how many people learn about Tesla and SpaceX through him and his content and the things that he says versus...
And they don't do any ads.
Exactly.
They don't do any ads because I think he's a great example of it at scale.
Another thing that I wanted to get your thoughts on, this is something that I've kept hearing a couple times in conversations with founders or go-to-market leaders, that product differentiation is becoming harder and harder because every platform is becoming the same. Outbound platforms, marketing intelligence platforms, MarTech, sales tech, they all kind of have an overlap on features. And so the idea that you can have a 10x feature that wins you business versus everyone else is becoming harder and harder. And so the differentiation is go-to-market and who's just better at, like, go-to-market versus product, essentially. How do you think about that?
I couldn't agree more. When we were getting ready to start Champify, I called the previous founder and CEO of Heap, the company he worked at, and he was product background, nerdy as could be, Stanford engineer, really smart guy, 10 times smarter than me. And I said, hey, I'm concerned about this. It's a crowded category. I think the way we're going to go about it's differentiated, but exactly how differentiated? And he goes, look, the technical moat and differentiation for every single company is getting narrower and narrower. And I think that's true. I think like if you have a 10x feature, you're not going to have it for a long time. The market dynamics are too strong and there's too much transparency, right? So like and it's getting way easier to copy. So like, and like people look at that as like, oh, someone copied our feature. It's like, no, that means like someone has proved that it's good for the customers and the market. Therefore, of course, everyone thinking rationally is going to do something similar. Right? Like your job is to serve the customer. So Finn, I agree with it a ton. And I think what that means is like, okay, how do you differentiate on the go-to-market side, on the service side, on the success side with PS, with just iterating faster on what your customers are saying? I think all of that matters more than ever.
Another one is, I think Adam Robinson called it inbound-led outbound. I think Chris Walker talks about signal-based outbound. Idea basically being that you get intent data and then you reach out, but what's the intent data that you're looking at? And I know we talked about cold outbound being more efficient because of the content that you do. Do you guys do anything in terms of, oh, the VP of sales at Target account liked my LinkedIn post, maybe it's time for our SDR to go outbound to them and send them an email because clearly they're in our ecosystem and they've seen some stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for us, intent or some form of warmth, we're always trying to look at. This could look like, hey, Taylor our head of marketing put out an awesome report on how successful advocate tracking is. Okay, who's looking at it? What are they looking at? What parts of the email? That's standard. Who's coming to the website? Great. Let's have a Slack channel saying who those people are or what they're visiting. I think the new ones are the ones you mentioned, Finn. Connecting with me on LinkedIn. They know who I am. They know what Champify is, right? Who's liking some of our posts? How do we get people that are happy end users of our product that are talking about us? Who's liking that stuff? Yeah, to us, that's like, okay, you're a step closer in terms of who's aware. And that's what our whole product's about. Our whole product is about, it's getting harder and harder to stand out. It's getting harder to break in when there's no warmth. So where can you focus on people that they're already familiar, they're already aware, they already have some type of trust, they've already had some good brand experience, and go tap into that throughout their entire employment journey across multiple employers.
Right.
So I think what you just asked is kind of like a little bit earlier in that awareness journey. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's just, once you have an engine like you have running of a LinkedIn account that's performing well and you have great content going out, there's just so many opportunities to, I don't know, your SDR sends a cold email to a target prospect. They reply positively. As soon as they reply positively, you could have some automation that now through your LinkedIn account, you connect with that VP sales at that account that just replied positively and said, hey, saw that you're chatting with Matt. Just wanted to say hi and connect and see if you have any questions about the product, right? Dylan, by the way, I see you in here. I know that you guys are building this out right now for you guys. So I want to get your questions and what's top of mind for you right now. All right, Dylan says, I just did a LinkedIn Live today with factors about intent signal. Something that's really great that we're using at the moment is we have a trigger for any contacts who are on HubSpot attached to a deal, have seen a LinkedIn ad from us. We're running thought leader ads of my content and have also visited the website. This triggers an alert and I reach out to them from my LinkedIn. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many things you can hack together. Todd, you guys are selling to go-to-market leaders. Go-to-market leaders are one of the most active audiences on LinkedIn, probably the most active audience, maybe HR being close second. If you would be chatting to a founder or CEO and they're in the telehealth space, selling to chief medical officers, is this still a good idea or is this only really relevant if you're selling to go-to-market or HR leaders?
I don't know. I think it's definitely not a bad idea anywhere. How much of a good idea, I'm not sure, right? Like if our buyers weren't all over LinkedIn, probably spending more time than they should be on LinkedIn, I wouldn't be taking this serious.
Yep.
Right. I think it also depends what you're trying to do, because like if you're building a massive venture scale business, like having a brand from a recruiting standpoint, people knowing how you think, there's other benefits than just customer acquisition, partnerships, potential acquirers. Like I think there's a lot of other things that come from it. But like for me, if all of our customers weren't spending a lot of time here, I definitely wouldn't be investing the same level of time. I'd find some other channel, right, and put the same level of thought into it, but I'm not sure if this is what it would be.
Makes sense. Are you thinking about now at the stage that you're at and kind of you got the machine rolling, you're posting every week, you have some of your team members doing this. Are you thinking about as you grow in the company to do more or less of this?
More. I would say more from a select few people. Like our logic right now is like, there's a handful of people that I think can get big followings. Let's do everything to make that happen. It's not like a ton of people doing shallow LinkedIn engagement. Like I think I'd rather have a handful of people going really all in. And for me, that's much like Taylor had to push me. I'm pushing Taylor now. Hey, I don't care if people are saying your friends are texting you, say, haha, you're an influencer now. Like do this. There's a benefit of it. It may feel a little unnatural. You're actually helping a lot of people. I get DMs from people all the time saying, wow, Taylor's so sharp. How'd you hire her? What, like you don't realize you're helping a lot of people in doing it. And I think that makes up for getting called corny in a text message from your friends from college.
Right. What do people miss about what it takes to do this stuff and do it successfully? We touched on a couple things. Hooks, you need to be dedicated. Is there anything that we didn't cover or that people completely forget about, that this is actually what matters or what's important?
I think it's three things. I think it's consistency. I think it's like taking the structure of the hooks, the takeaways seriously. And the third thing is just like, what are you uniquely equipped to talk about? Right? Like I see people like Chris Orlow posting, like, I think he's incredible at frameworks, right? And I think he's so good at talking about discovery frameworks and how to structure things. Like, I'm not the best salesperson, right? Like I have a good experience in being an early sales manager and having to learn under a couple of different CROs and making tons of mistakes. So like most of my posts is more around that, like team building, structuring. Don't get me wrong, I could talk about deal stuff, but I don't think that's unique to me. And I think there's a ton of people doing that really well. So I just would really say, kind of look in the mirror and think about, what am I uniquely equipped to talk about? Where do I actually have something of value that not many people can offer? And I have a lot to say there, right? And then just be super consistent with it.
Yeah. I think basically all of your posts are text posts. Is there any reason for that, or any reason why no video?
I did some video early on. First off, I think I have a face for radio. Second off, I think that it just didn't work as well. And if it did, I would do it. Like, I don't really care. I bought a lamp to put up here so I can look like an influencer, but I just don't use it a lot because the video didn't really engage.
Love it. Okay. Well, maybe you would get some people who are Tom Dwan fans reaching out to you for some poker tips. Guys, any questions here? So far, we have 15 minutes left here with Todd, both in the Zoom and in the LinkedIn Live. If you have any questions, now's your chance. Dylan, any questions you have as you're in the weeds building out this process, or even anything you have to add, because I know that you guys are driving actually results from it. It's not like you're at beginner stage. I'm just curious. Evelyn, go ahead, Evelyn.
So Todd, when was the first time that you saw your post started taking off? And I imagine your answer will have something to do with the authenticity. Where are you best? Where are unique skill sets? But was there any point in time where you saw, oh Lord, like I'm starting to get like some serious traction on my posts?
The first one was when we launched. But when we launched, we told everyone, our investors, friends, families, people we worked with, early design partners, because we had a couple of early, not quite paying customers, but people using the product when we launched. And we kind of asked everyone to help us. And in that launch, that got a lot of exposure. And I was like, whoa, okay, the reach for this can be kind of crazy, but that was pretty orchestrated. That was the first time. The second time was just like before I started taking this real serious in December of last year. There was a handful of posts that did go pretty, not viral, but did go pretty big. That got me to see like, oh, wow, if I did take this serious, I think there was a lot more here. And then it was really in December when I was like, all right, we're committing this for 2 months. We said, Taylor and I, let's like really do this. It's the bet we're going to make. And then all of a sudden we look back at like impressions over the last 30 days and, you're seeing high 7 figures of impressions. You're like, how else can you get that? That's when it was like, okay, with the consistency, there's a lot here. We'd be crazy not to take it seriously.
Very interesting. Thank you. And are you thinking about supplementing this further with, you may already have covered this at the beginning. I'm sorry, I only joined 20 minutes in, but are you thinking of supplementing this further with some influencers and kind of like orchestrating more of that initial push that you did?
Meaning like us having an influencer strategy?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, honestly, so much of it seems so inauthentic to me, where it's just like all these people that are like, oh, I'm posting. I'm like, I know you're paid to do this. You probably don't even use the product. Kind of feels weird. I think it's really strange in general. Like, on Instagram, you have to say like, hey, sponsored posts. There's none of that on LinkedIn. So it's always kind of weird pay to play. I think there's more authentic ways to do it that I'd like to do. But the reality is like, we have kind of said like, I don't really want to just pay people to say nice things about us. So let's hold off until we find a more creative way to do that. I'd love, we probably won't do much here. And maybe that's stupid, but like, I don't know, it feels more natural.
I feel like the only way to really make it work in B2B, and I think B2C is also moving there, is not influencers, but ambassadors, like long-term relationships. Like find people who are already fans, who are already using the product, who are already mentioning you every now and then organically, and then make it a little bit more official and build a plan around and maybe incentivize them on top of it a little bit through, I don't know, whatever. So Dylan said, Todd, how active are you in your DMs on LinkedIn? Are you actively reaching out to people who are consistently engaging on your content or no? I guess now you answered extremely yes, but not enough.
Yeah, the DMs are busy. a lot of noise. I think the management of LinkedIn DMs is terrible. Like I think the product's not good there, but I think I could be doing more here. Right. And to me, this is like, it's very simple. I write some post, someone, maybe 100 people want to connect or follow. There's 6 of them that are like, oh, wow, this is like really interesting for us. At some point, a handful of them get DMs. I think I could be better at managing that process, but like that's kind of how it works today.
Guys, drop in questions, unmute yourself. If you have any, feel free. How do you think about quality versus quantity? Why not post 7 times a week, spend a little less time per post? Where do you land?
I don't know. I honestly, I don't like, I know this is a little bit contradictory to what I said around like taking the hooks and the takeaways serious, but I don't really spend a ton of time thinking like, oh, do we need to do this twice a day or does it need to be 4 times a week? Right now, I'm just like, all right, be consistent, which probably means between 2 and 4 posts a week. They tend to be a little longer just because I want someone to take away something from that. There's not like a really good reason behind that, Finn.
I'm trying to lead you somewhere because I think you're doing it exactly right. You're teaching people with every interaction and post that they see what they can expect next time. And I'm sure you can create a pretty decent post pretty quickly in 5 or 10 minutes just because you're in the weeds doing things. But it's like, that's probably going to be a kind of obvious, kind of vanilla, kind of inside post that someone has already heard 10 times. And so if you do that 50% of the time and then 50% of the time it's something really good, it's like next time they see a post, they're like, 50-50 chance it's going to be good. So I'm not sure if I'm going to engage. But if instead you just make sure that every single time you post, it's something great and there's a takeaway and there's meat in it and you really thought about it and there's examples in there and it's expansive and it's non-obvious, then you just keep building the muscle that people, every time they see a post of you, they're like, oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah, I think that's the idea. That's definitely the idea. I don't think it's not hard to come up with the ideas. Like look, we're an early stage company, right? So I'm still very much in it, from hiring, from in customers to in renewals to in product meetings to writing PRDs. So like there's tons of stuff to talk about. I think everyone has tons of things to talk about. As long as you're having meetings, there's interesting things that happen and just got to constantly be thinking about, okay, what's unique? And I think the last thing I'd say that it didn't come up at all today is like, I was a little too vanilla to start. Like I had never been the person that's like getting up there. This is what I believe. My way's right. Your idea is stupid. Like that's not my personality, but like LinkedIn rewards strong personality. Like LinkedIn hates vanilla, right? So like it's in your best interest to be more divisive and say, actually, I don't agree with that. That's crazy. Or, hey, I've been hearing this. I think people are completely wrong. That was something that took me a little while to get over the hump because I'm like, that's just not my personality. But vanilla, boring does not work. Like you have to kind of pick a side and have a little bit stronger opinion, even if it's against your personality.
I don't think LinkedIn hates vanilla. I think people hate vanilla.
Someone hates it.
Dylan asks, are you reposting any previous top performers with adjusted hooks, etc., or is every post a new, fresh one?
Yeah, we haven't done a good job of doing that. I just heard Sam Jacobs talking to Adam Robinson on a podcast like a couple of days ago, maybe yesterday. And they were saying like a lot of the reposting of old content doesn't work as well. I haven't really tried it, not because like, hey, I don't think it'll work as well, just because I've only really been taking this serious for a while. So like, I feel like we have a ton of new stuff to talk about. Like right now we have a backlog of posts. It's not like a shortage. I think if that started to happen, I'd probably do more of that.
Yeah, I think generally that's true. I have one post that every time I post it, it gets us 5 demos, but I can only do this once every 6 months, roughly. Any other questions?
That's awesome to have, Finn. I need one of them.
Oh,
hi,
awesome.
I have a question.
Oh, there we go. All right.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Cassie. So I work for a company. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for your time. I said that first. And thank you, Finn, for getting this together. I work for a company called Rev Partners. We're a HubSpot partner agency. Essentially, we do RevOps as a service. And our founder is super big on this motion, LinkedIn-led growth. He's got everyone posting. Like this is the bulk of my job on the demand gen team. And we're kind of caught in this loop where it's mostly our own like employees and team members posting on everybody's posts. Do you have any advice for getting out of that loop? Like I have all different things where I'm sending them lists of people to comment on. I'm trying to get people to do Zoom coffees, but like everyone in leadership is like, this is already taking so much of my time. Any advice there?
Yeah, we have this too, or sometimes someone will post, it's like, hey, go look this. But like, we're not a huge company. So like you can see if it's all Champify people liking it, I'm sure you run into the same issue. I think the thing you have to get is like less time on the engagement and liking each other's stuff and commenting on each other's stuff and just writing good content. And I think what that means is like, hey, when you're in this meeting and this comes up, jot this down. Or like, hey, we're going to do a writing block together. Write down like what were the two most interesting things that happened in an internal meeting and an external meeting happened this week, and focus on the actual things that are happening. And then maybe secondly is help with, and again, I'm not an expert in this. This is just what I would do is like, what are the right pillars of like, hey, at Rev Partners, here's like the things we're seeing across common installations with customers or whatever it is. And like have like a couple themes that you can get them to start harping on like, all right, theme A, theme B, theme C, and that'll help them say like, all right, here's the things I need to write in a little more guided fashion. Because the easy thing is just say, I'll go like the CEO's post. That counts, right, Cassie? Like, leave me alone. And I think the more you can push them in the right direction, the better.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. I wrote that down. Like, spend more time on enabling great writing versus telling.
Yeah, and show them what great looks like. Like, hey, here's another example of a company where people are doing this. Like, we could steal some version of this post for us. Like the format's great, or the way that they told the story was great. And I think the more you show them, more inspiration will happen. And then like anything management, like when people are doing it well, highlight that, tell the CEO to say good job. Like, hey, this is working. That matters.
I think Austin had a question here on the LinkedIn Live. Todd, I know Taylor outlined a great recap of how she convinced you to take this step out of your comfort zone, but was there one or two main things that you can look back on and point to as the point she convinced you to give this a shot?
She convinced us to start paying for a writing coach. And I think I'm pretty frugal with the company money. And I think once that happened, I was like, all right, I got to take this really serious. So I think that was it, even though it wasn't like a massive investment or a ton of hours, it just was like someone helping us. And I think that's really what, kind of like when you pay a management consultant to do the slides you already had, like, it's like, okay, now we take it serious. I think there was a component of that. And then the second thing was just like, at one point she showed the inbound and she's like, look at the percentage of people that are self-attributing as LinkedIn. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay, this is bigger than I thought. Like, if we're not doing this, there's some real negative implications of that.
Dylan asked if you're open to
showing
sharing
data, getting us to pay.
Dylan asked if you're open to sharing who the writing coach is.
Yeah, his name's Alec Paul.
Oh, I know Alec. He was on the podcast a week ago. Yeah, he's cool. Yeah, who do you learn from? Is there anyone who you're following or people you learn stuff from? Well, it can be on LinkedIn or something else.
All right, couple of things. David Gerhardt, I think, is the best. Like, I think he's incredible. I think what he's doing with his community is amazing. It's really funny. I wrote this in a post. Like, I used to have no respect for marketers. I was always salesperson. What is marketing doing? And now my mind is completely flipped. Marketing is so hard.
Came to the dark side.
I have such respect for these people. I think one of the best people out there doing any type of marketing is this guy named Nathan Latka. If you ever heard him, he runs a company called Founder Path. Go watch one of his webinars. It's incredible. He'll have all of you right now with your faces on, calling you out by your names, texting you in the middle. Like, it's just incredible what he does. He just puts on an event that I bet you he's making a lot of money doing. I think he's one of the best. They're the two that come out. And then like just random stuff I like. I like the Founders podcast. He tends to talk about David Ogilvy a lot. And that is something I really like around just copywriting and messaging and doing hard things, company building.
Yeah, Ogilvy on advertising is a classic if you haven't read it. Yeah, I mean, Nathan, I remember the first time I joined Nathan's webinar. I just joined as you expect on a webinar, kind of camera off, sitting back. And
at some point
he's like, Ben, who are you? Where are you calling him from? Turn on your camera. And like, oh my God, you never forget that experience. And he,
I met him at SaaStr, and at the end, very that's really interesting. Cool. Can I film you saying that right now? And I was like, damn, this guy is really on it. Like, he's just very good.
He is. I was on his conference last week, 2 weeks ago, SaaS Open in Austin, and he remembers everyone's name by heart, and he's just on top of shit. Yeah, and he said one of the things that he does with his podcast and with the webinar too, he wants people to love or hate him in the first 60 seconds. Like when he calls people out, like he did me, like you either come back to every single event, or you're like, I'm never coming back. This was horrible. Cool. All right, we're wrapping up here. Todd, any question I should have asked that I didn't ask?
No, I think we covered a lot. Hopefully this is valuable for everyone. Thanks for taking an hour out of your day. And Finn, thanks for reaching out. I appreciate it.
Cool. Guys, thank you so much for joining. If you want to write in the chat what you enjoyed or what you took away from this conversation so Todd can see maybe a couple things that he Todd people here. This will also go on our YouTube and Spotify. Obviously, Todd, you should follow him on LinkedIn. We'll put the links and everything in those show notes if people want to look up Champify or connect with you on LinkedIn. So useful, says Evelyn. David says, thanks, Finn and Todd. Great session. Dave said, thanks. Super interesting comments about the importance of good hooks on LinkedIn. My favorite, just quick resource on hooks, the last book by Alex Hormozi, $100 Million Leads. Took me a long time to read it because everyone's so hyped about it. And I was like, I'm not going to read the same thing. Here's a little section on how to write great headlines and the principles behind great headlines. They're the same principles that apply to great hooks. It's like 9 points. Read that one page and you'll be able to write much better hooks. All right, guys. Thank you, Todd, so much. This was awesome. Thank you guys for joining. And I'll see you around.
Awesome. Thanks all. Have a good one. See ya.
Bye-bye.